Hello, my name is Torange Yeghiazarian, founding artistic director of Golden Thread Productions based in San Francisco. We are the first American theater company devoted to plays from or about the Middle East. It's my pleasure today to welcome you to How to Stay Creative While Everything Around You is Falling Apart, a conversation with Hanane Hajj, part of a series of events in the Gilder Coigney International Theater Award program produced by the League of Professional Theater Women. This program celebrates the achievements of theater women across the globe and the many ways in which they're using their artistic practice in traditional and innovative forms to motivate public dialogue and stimulate action in the struggle for peace and justice. Hanane is this year's recipient of the Gilder Coigney International Award. The organizers were hoping to mount a live production of Hanane's internationally acclaimed work, Jogging. So was Golden Thread. But instead, we introduce a video Hanane has created with clips of jogging and a glimpse of Beirut. Let's watch together.
وبتبلش علاقتي الخاصة مع الطبيعة ببيروت. بتحيرني هاللحظة وبتدهشني. لحظة اللي بيعسعس فيها الليل وبيتنفس فيها الصبح وبيتسحب من خرومه. لحظة اللي بتتسقسق العتمة بالضوء وبيصير وجهها ينمش 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 بنقط من نور توسع وتفلش لتغطي كل شيء. شنف دني بصوت الحمام وبكم عصفور اللي معشش على الشجرة وبجرب استوعب أبجدية الصفاء اللي بتشع من زقزقتها. بتخيل حالي وحدة منهم بالكورس تبعهم وبرفرف لبعيد لبعيد لمطارح مش من هالعالم. وبتخطر على بالي الآية الكريمة اللي بتقول والطير صافات كل قد علم صلاته وتسبيحه لكن لا تفقهون تسبيحهم إن الله كان عليما غفورا. وأنا متاخدة بهالروحانيات وغاصة بالميتافيزيك وعم شوف الكون شفاف 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 مثل عين الديك وإذ توعى سحلة خرا حمام على عيني. ودغري بيطرق على بالي سؤال الوجيه اللي بيقول هل بيجوز الحمام يسبح ربه وهو عم بيشخ؟ ليكو سؤال ظاهره عبيط بس جوهره غويط، سؤال فلسفي ما لقيت له جواب باللغة العربية فقلبته براسي بكل اللغات. Could a creature praise God while shitting? مسرحية ما اسمها جوجينج، اسمها جوجينج نقطتين مسرح قيد التطوير مش عمل قيد التطوير. Theater in progress. جوجينج نقطتين theater in progress with a big T.
المسرحية بلشتها من 5 سنين، كانوا عبارة عن مختبر مسرحي جماعي حر مفتوح على تجارب عديدة. انكتب النص أكثر من مرة وبأشكال مختلفة. بشغلنا على الإضاءة والصوت جربنا تقنيات متطورة، حاولنا ناخد السينوغرافيا على مطارح جديدة، وخلطنا فنون مختلفة ببعض البعض. بس بما أنه هدفي الأساسي كان أنه أقدر أوصل للناس وين ما كانوا، خاصة بالأماكن المهمشة، اخترنا بالآخر أنه نرجع على جوهر المسرح، هالفضاء الفارغ، the empty space، وين ما التفاعل بين الممثلة والجمهور هو أساس العملية المسرحية، مفتاح للخيال ومدخل للواقع.
روجيه، بعد ما اجت الكهرباء؟
لا، بعد ما اجت.
بالسجلات الرسمية أنا اسمي حنان علي الحاج علي، مواطنة لبنانية أصيلة منذ أكثر من 10 سنوات، مواطنة فرنسية جلب بالزواج منذ أكثر من 10 سنوات، مزوجة لبناني أصيل فرنساوي أصلي، ماروني مقصل، سنة تجليط، عمل سنة ليطلق.
اكتشفت المسرح بفضل الحرب.
هي كل الصور اللي عندي.
وقت ما كنا نقضي أيام وليالي بالملاجئ، وشفت كيف المسرح والفن مثل عصا سحرية قادرين يحولوا أجواء القلق والخوف لعيد من التضامن والفرح.
هيدي أول ما عملت مسرح كنت عندي بالمدرسة قبل الحرب بشي سنة. هذا روجيه بفرقة الحكوات لما أسسناها بالحرب، يعني بال77.
وبالوقت اللي كنت عم أدرس طب لأرضي بيي قررت أدرس مسرح.
هيدي صور مسرح الحكواتي.
وأنا وتلميذي تعرفت على فرقة الحكواتي وكرت المسبحة.
السينوغرافيا طبعا المسرحية كتير حلوة والتياب روعة. هودي كمان بالحكواتي، هودي بعز الحكواتي.
الله على ايام زمان، ولكن رزق الله على هذيك الايام، بهذيك الايام نبقى ايد بايد.
لا شمس لا في لا هوا لا مي.
كل كل جولي.
مع السلامة ست حنان. المخرج الأصلي مش الحيوان.
هون بكلمة هيدي الأولاد الصغار. شو حلوين هالصور. كارين لما تجوزت بالحرب جبت 4 أولاد أنا، يعني كنا عم نعمل مسرح وعم نناضل وعم نجيب أولاد. شو بدي أقول لك، كله على بعضه. هاي صورتي القبيلة. روجيه، أبو الروج طبعاً، يوسف، زينب، علي، مريم.
هالمرة عندها 4 أولاد، ولا واحد منهم بالبلد مثلهم مثل كل رفقاتهم. وهالمرة مواطنة لبنانية عمرها بدكم تقولوا ببداية الخمسينات، واللي بتعمل كل يوم رياضة الجوجينج الهرولة لتتوقع من الستريس والاوستيوبوروز. هلا هالتمارين مفروض تساعدها تحافظ على توازنها النفسي والجسدي، لأنه بتفرز بجسمها نوعين من الهرمونات، الأدرينالين والدوبامين. واحد بيروق، واحد بيفوق، واحد بيقوم، واحد بينوم، واحد بيكربج، واحد بيهبرج. وبهالمشوار تستعرض أحلام وخيبات وآمال وشخصيات، بتضلها تركض محلها بمدينة بتعمر لتهد وبتبني لتدمر.
ما وقفت امشي ببيروت، وما في يوم بمشي فيه إلا ما بشوف بيروت كيف عم تتحول. تدمير منهجي لنسيج المدينة، الساحات، الفضاءات العامة، الجنينات، السينمات، المسارح، حيطان ورا حيطان ورا حيطان عم ترتفع وتخنق روح المدينة.
سكرينه داير من دار الحديد.
ختن خجل لا خذل. تذكرت شغلي، في شي فولونتير يقرا مقدمة المسرحية لكنت كفيت التمارين بليز؟ حدا يقرا هالورقة؟ مين؟ ما حدا؟ يلا.
أهلا وسهلا فيكم. لقائنا بلش أو بالأحرى رح يبلش. نطلب من حضراتكم إطفاء أجهزة الهاتف نهائياً وكلياً، ونلفت نظر الجميع إلى أنه هالمسرحية غير شرعية بتار، بنت حرام، حبلت فيها بنات أفكار الممثلة على عينك يا تاجر، من دون شهود ولا وثيقة رسمية ولا إذن من الأمن العام.
صار لنا سنين عم ندافع عن حقنا بحرية التعبير، وأنا رفضت إني أخضع لقوانين الرقابة. وبما أنه ما كان عندي إذن مسبق من الدولة لأعرض، ولا مسرح ببيروت قدر يستقبلني، فاضطرينا نقدمها بفضاءات بديلة.
So I am like my play, Batard, Bint Haram, and I am proud of this diversity. Thank you.
بأماكن أندرغراوند، عدراج المدينة، بالضيعة البعيدة، بالمخيمات، بالجامعات. وما كنت متوقع أبداً المصير اللي لقيته المسرحية. كل عمري أحلم بمسرح 360 درجة، بأجورا تجمع المواطنين تيفكروا ويتحاوروا ويتناقشوا سوا. وبفضل هالثورة صارت بيروت هالمسرح المفتوح على وسع المدينة.
من بناها؟ أطفال، ثورة، جمهورية، جوعتونا وقتلتونا وبهدلتونا وزليتونا. الحرية والحق مثل المي بالصخر بيحفر. فيفا لا ليبرتي، فيفا لا ليبرتي. يا الشر، الوجع، العار، الفحش، الغدر، القدر، يا الوحش الكبير اللي عم يزحف علي. لحوسني، لملمني، شمشمني، نتوجني، عضوضني. أنا كلني لك، مرتك أنا، صنوك أنا، غريمك أنا، حريمك أنا، حرامك أنا. كل مسام جسمي رح تتفتح على شرفك. سجادي بتول رح تنفرد تحت جريك. سجادي طاهرة، سجادة العاهرة. خزقني، فرقني، جمعني، جمعني، جمعني. انتفخ، حراق، غل، شراق، بخ، أحفاظ، أحقاق. رح اتخلل، رح اتحلل، رح اتخمر داخلك من جديد. كرمالك، كرمال الليلة معك أنا عشت. أخيراً رح كون لحالي، أخيراً رح كون محمدي.
Dernièrement, je suis tombée sur un poème qui m'a beaucoup touchée, d'une poétesse somalienne qui a à peu près 35 ans, qui avait fui son pays, la Somalie, pour se réfugier en Angleterre. شعر كتير بسيط بس كتير بليغ، بيقول بتصرف: ما حدا بدب ولاده بالمي إلا إذا كانت المي أأمن من الأرض الصلبة اللي واقفين عليها. ما حدا بيختار السجون أو المخيمات إلا إذا كان السجن أو المخيم أأمن من مدينة عم تاكلها النيران. ما حدا، اوعكن تصدقوا، بيترك بيته بطيبه إلا إذا قرب بيته بذاته لدينته ووشوش وقال له: لك شو بعدك قاعد عم تعمل جواتي؟ ما شايف الدم حولك وحواليك؟ قوم حمول ولادك بسنانك وانقلع عني وهروب وبيعد، وقد ما فيك تبيعد وركود وضلك ركود وضلك ركود. وأنا بيروت كل يوم الصبح من فترة طويلة، وخاصة بالفترة الأخيرة،
بتيجي لدينتي وبتقلي حنان، حنحونة، حنحينو، ولك شو بعدك قاعدة بالتخت يا خمة نوم؟ وقفي لشوف، قاعدة على حبة التخت، دكي كلسات البريس بجريكي، سفي حبات الغدة وظهري وركدي وضل ركدي وضل ركدي، ويلا لينا هات لنسمي ونحمي مثل كل يوم.
Thank you so much, Hanane, for that beautiful and informative documentary. It gives us great insight into this project, Jogging, that you've created and have been touring, right, for a number of years. Can you tell us a little bit about the genesis of the play and how it has evolved from its early days and how it's been received by different kinds of audiences across the world?
Yes, I begin to say that there are two things that allow me to survive the ongoing dire situation that we've been living in Lebanon since years and since decades. It's theater and jogging. I was not having in mind to do a play. I was having some impressions that sometimes I used to come back at home and write them down, or I do dream like most of the joggers. So it might be dreams about what is the best Beirut I dream of, for example, or what could be the future of my 4 children, because I have 4 children, and sometimes I have erotic dreams. And so yes, and I think about my relationship to Beirut always, and I'm always I've been always stimulated by the mutation that has been inflicted to Beirut, especially in the last decade. And in a special phase of my life, I was living a very painful personal story. My son at that time had a very severe cancer in his scapula here, Ewing sarcoma, one of the most severe cancers. And he suffered a lot. And when he reached the utmost of pain, I surprised myself once while I was jogging that I dreamt that I was killing him by putting a cushion on his face and suffocating him till he rendered his last breath. But when I realized what I dreamt, I couldn't move. I suddenly felt that I'm a tiny piece of this monstrous character of Medea, a character that always fascinated me, but and of course I wished to play it, but I refused always to play it even in my while I was studying acting, because I was never convinced that a mother could kill her own children, no matter are the reasons. But when I had that dream, I realized how naive I was, and all of a sudden I was invaded by a farouche desire to search about the remaining pieces among the women, the Lebanese women, Palestinian women, Syrian women, Iraqi women who are living in Beirut, and that nobody is telling her stories. And this is how I began I began to read, to see whatever I could find about media. Euripide, Laurent Godet, Heiner Müller, Lars von Trier, books, articles. And while I was reading that, something happened in Lebanon, an event, a horrible event that happened in Lebanon, and it was a sign for me that this is the subject that I want to really tackle in my future play. One day in the village, in the town of Parsav, a very beautiful woman, very educated, who married her husband after a very famous, beautiful love story, and who has 3 beautiful daughters. One night, poisoned her 3 daughter with the fruit salad, topped with cream and powered with a good quantity of rat poison. And before she eats from the same fruit salad, she videotaped a full video for her husband explaining why she did that. And of course, she killed herself. So when I found this story, I was driven by a kind of hectic desire to search more and more. And this is how also I came up to find the story of Zahra that culminated my play, especially that Zahra had a long story, and her story finished in a very dramatic, tragic way in 2013, when her last child went to go to fight, to be a martyr, battling beside the Syrian army. This was the metaphor about my play, and what I did is I wanted to mix my personal story, because as I told you, I felt that I'm a piece of this horrible puzzle of media with the other stories. But this wasn't the subject. This was the metaphor, if you want. The subject was I was concerned about is how I can tell the impossibility of being an active citizen in Beirut. How citizenship is forbidden in Beirut. How we came up after we had this glorious ancient history and modern history in the 20th century, being this oasis of freedom, how we came up to a situation where everything is collapsing and we are prevented from having our evident human rights, like freedom of speech, like the right of education, the right of vote, etc., etc. And I wanted to make an agora. For me, theater must resume its primary role, to be an agora for citizens to meet together and to
deal and to tackle the critical issues of their lives. Of course, in the beginning, when I hadn't this clear in my mind, as I was invited by a very interesting group of people called Kahraba to present the first monologue, while I was describing Beirut, to present it in a open air festival in one of the very beautiful open stairs of Beirut. It happens to be in Mar Mikhail, the region hit really by the explosion of the 4th of August. But at that time, this festival was gathering people from different backgrounds, and it was a multicultural festival. So they wanted me to close the festival. So what I did, of course, wanting to prove that I'm a modern artist and that I use sophisticated things to please my ego, I imagined to do that on a treadmill, as you saw in the, and I wanted to play, to dance, to do everything, not to quit this treadmill. And while I was doing that, I, with the help of Eric Dugnot, find a way to deconstruct this treadmill little by little till we kept only the rolling carpet as a kind of rolling road. Of course, the audience was very pleased. And by chance, one of the curators from Belgium, Mohamed Ikoban, the artistic president of Muslim Association, was there, and he was pleased by the half an hour of the play, the work in progress. He invited me to go to Belgium in order to do a residency. He asked me, "Are you willing to do so?" I said, "Of course, I want to do that." And I went there with the dramaturg Abdallah Al-Kafri and Eric Dugnot and Marie-Lise Aad. And there we began to work on the dramaturgy, to think about really the core, what is the core, that the essential concept of the play. And of course, I continued to practice and to prove to myself that I want to do something very sophisticated. So also I invited a programmer, Yasin Sabti, who helped me. We did great experiences, and also the graphic designer David Habshi. We melted the graphic design with a special program on internet, on computer, to have the direct light and sound from my movements, etc. But when the dramaturgy evolved, we concentrated on the concept of the play being an ambulant agora, and wanting myself, as I always wanted to do, and I always done with Al-Hakawati troupe, the storytellers, to go to the most marginalized areas, the camps, refugee camps, the villages, to places where the audience would have never been seen theater. I realized that I have to discard, to epurate, to do a sober presentation, and to go over the minimalism. So we ended up really dropping all these sophisticated materials and procedures, and we stick to the empty space where the core of the theater making is the actor, the actress, with his or her body, her imagination, her voice, her discourse, and her capacity to involve, to engage the audience with her, to be very intimate with the audience on one hand, and to keep a safe distance with the audience on the other hand, to help them stimulate their critical senses, especially that in my play, wherever I go, the Q&A session at the end of the play is not a Q&A session. It is an epilogue, an integrated part of the play. Wherever I go, I presented the play most of 200 times in Lebanon, and I don't know how many, maybe 75 times in different festivals all over the world, and always I had this agora. And I have to tell you that this journey, this ambulant agora, is not easy at all, because either in Lebanon or abroad, it was very difficult, and it is very difficult to go with a play to remote areas where you don't have infrastructures, where you don't have trains, where you don't have support from the states. And it was only thanks to some institution like Heinrich Böll Foundation, for example, who helped me funded me with some money to really keep on going on the roads of Beirut for 3 years. And when I go outside, I was often had to see what to do and how to behave and how to present the play, while often I was refused to have visas for my colleagues, for Syrian people, because I have Syrian in my group, Lebanese people, and one Palestinian fellow. So I was able many times to go alone to present my play because I have a French nationality.
Mm-hmm.
So this gives you a little bit a kind of how the play progressed.
Yeah, I have a couple of follow-up questions. So for our audience members who may not be familiar with Al-Hakawati, because I know that training was such a big part of your evolution as a theater artist. So Al-Hakawati are popular storytellers that travel all over. Can you tell us a little bit about how that has influenced? I mean, you say that you want to take the play to all the remote areas, or you've in the past said you want to democratize theater. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that? Why is that important to you, and what was the influence of Al-Hakawati?
Yeah, to democratize and to decentralize arts and culture, because I believe
because in the video you say Beirut has now become the theater that you've always imagined it. Yeah, so talk a little more about that.
The magic power of the collective experience of practicing and enjoying arts, I had the chance to know in depth, was not only in shelters during the war, but I had the chance to experience it in the Hakawati Theater troupe, as you said, storyteller, while I was still a student at the Faculty of Beaux-Arts. It was a radical experience that came from politics to theater. We wanted to, at that time, to surpass the sclerosis in which we're thinking the classical forms of theater, and to create a vivid, popular, inclusive, interactive, collective form of doing theater, aiming at, first, safeguarding the neglected memory of the marginalized communities, especially the communities from the north, far north, and from the south of Lebanon, and communities from what we used to call the belt of misery that was surrounding Beirut, especially in the southern suburbs of Beirut. And we wanted to rewriting the twisted history of those communities, and hence the history of Lebanon. We wanted to honor the language of those people of the South, considered this language and this dialect considered for a long time to be a backward language, to be a despised language, because for decades the only accepted language and dialect in the theater of Lebanon was the language of the people of Mount Lebanon. So it was a premiere. It was the first time in the history of theater in Lebanon that such language appeared on stage. Also allowing the different communities to participate to the elaboration of the writing, the mise en scène, and the production of the plays. Also to rejuvenate the art, the extraordinary art of the traditional Hakawati, weaving it with the modern aesthetic of theater as a Western form of arts. Also we wanted to tour with Hakawati troupe, and we toured with the Hakawati troupe all over Lebanon. We staged our plays on public spaces, on open air events, on alternative spaces, in shelters, taking the risk to cross many demarcation lines between the different factions of Beirut, between East Beirut, West Beirut. We risked our life because snipers were all over, and obstacles of militias were so for years we continued even during the war to do that. And we realized how much, on one hand, this kind of collective organic experience helped the people who are involved in it to discover their talents, to rediscover their flourishing identity, to know how to learn how to practice art and theater, how to write, how to. So this is on one hand. On the other hand, we saw how big and deep was the impact of such an experience on the minds and souls and the lives of people, getting feeling dignity again, feeling confidence again, praising again their own tradition, their own
culture.
Yes, etc., etc. So meeting and joining the Hakawati troupe was a founding event that marked with its seal my whole career, and it still does.
And just the other follow-up, I mean, you talked about this a little bit, but so the two threads I see in your piece, Jogging, there's the Medea thread, but then there's also the Beirut thread, right? So how would you describe your relationship with Beirut? I know that it's complicated.
My goodness, there are now a lot of friends who are with me now, Basma, Abdullah, Praline, and they know what I'm Bente. They know really what I'm talking about. It's an eternal, a mythical, a tragic, hate-love relationship. It's a very rich, complex, and paradoxical relationship. It's rich because Beirut, as you know, it's on the level of historical background, and during especially its recent history, the first half of the 20th century has been the most vibrant and vivid city in the Middle East, considered for decades being the oasis of freedom in the Arab countries, where a large number of intellectual and artists fled, sought refuge to escape the repression and the violence of their authoritarian regimes, for example, and where a lot of wealth and rich people were driven from bordering countries, from Egypt, Syria, Palestine, Iraq, because of revolution, coup d'etat, wars, etc. And also there are two marking events that happened that contributed unfortunately to the opulence of Beirut. It was the Nakba of 1948, after the implementation by force of the state of Israel in Palestine. A lot of people fled, of course, a lot of refugees from middle class and from poor classes, but also a lot of bourgeois people with their money came to Beirut. And also there was a second wave of refugees after the defeat of 1967. And also when the PLO, the Palestinian organization of resistance, Palestinian resistance, was allowed to begin to act from Lebanese territory, also it contributed, of course, on one part of to create severe polemics and later fights, but also it had to bring a lot of money to Beirut. So having said this, I have to add that what helped also to drive this Arab capital was also what we call the bank privacy system in Lebanon, who lately totally collapsed, and we are not able anymore to have our own money. Yes, what I was saying is that
so Beirut was the Switzerland of
a kind of, it was called the Switzerland of the Moyen-Orient, and also it was very rich because for decades, especially in the 50s, 60s, and the first half of the 70s, the 18 religions that exist in Lebanon, it was considered as being a very a cross fertilization between cultures, between ideas, etc. And we all benefited from this wealth. But unfortunately, this turned up to be a cause of a lot of fightings later on. And here I'm talking about complexity because the sources of wealth are at the same time opportunities for external interference in Lebanon's internal affairs. And because practicing this relative freedom and this political pluralism had led by the overlapping of various political, economic, and social factors to differences, to divisions, that are not limited to ideological divisions, but rather to armed conflicts. So, this is, everybody knows that the history of Lebanon is very complex. And this leads me to talk about why it's very paradoxical, my relationship to Beirut, because you heard me saying that thanks to the war, I discovered my passion. In the war, I was able to marry a Christian man, to live an extraordinary love relationship, and to have 4 children. And I was fed personally by this wonderful cross-cultural stream of knowledge, where a time of diversity was an source for practical richness. But in the same time, why it's paradoxical? Because I had these 4 children, but where are my children now? They are rejected by their own country. They don't have any chance to have good higher education, to have good medication, to have rights, to have. So the same country that generated all this richness are now putting away their young people, these minds. It's now what I can see, it's how the same city is killing the new talents, forcing thousands or even millions of Lebanese to leave and immigrate. I'm a Lebanese citizen, a woman who fell in love of this great city, and also but as I told you, that lost her children because of the constitution, of the confessional sectarian constitution of the state, of the city. But in the same time, it's controversial because I also, once more, and how lucky I am to live and to see actually how in the midst of the complete collapse that we are living, that is taking place on various levels, there are young people who are bent on resistance and change, claiming their political and social rights. How lucky I am to see that I am as ready as they are after we lost everything to defend our rights to dignity.
I mean, it's promising because we're now experiencing a kind of political renaissance, right? And
yes.
An awakening and resurgence of activism. But I want to ask you about religion, because I'm curious. You're one of very few practicing Muslim women that I've seen on stage. And I'm curious how that has impacted your art and you know, your colleagues' reaction to that, because you weren't veiling before, but then at one point you decided to do that. So there was a change. And then how did your colleagues respond to that? And how has that, I don't know, how does it inform your art, and how do audiences respond to it?
Yeah. To answer this question, I hope that I will be comprehensible, and I will be able to
so far express. You've been very comprehensive.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So first, the qualities that I found in the women of the south of Lebanon, to whom the women of my family belong, which are their sense of aesthetics, high sense of aesthetics, their freedom, and their courage. Second, my strong relationship with metaphysics since my childhood, which reached its climax during the Lebanese Civil War, where death surrounded us on every side, and it was melted to life in every second. So I took the decision to wear a scarf as an emblem because I found it beautiful, simply beautiful, to have a peace of mind and soul. By the way, I don't like the expression of veiled women, because having chosen to be an actress with a scarf unveils my real personality and makes it transparent.
Mm-hmm.
This happened in 1986 while I was enrolled in a postgraduate program in the US, because being considered at the time an avant-garde actress by my colleagues in Lebanon, I was apprehending a lot by instinct to make this step in Lebanon. So I made it in the States. And I was completely right about this instinct, because when I came back, the rejection was almost general. I think that the reaction was similar to the reactions facing minorities and marginalized people. Some considered that my decision made this imperative to move away from the world of art and theater, perhaps influenced those people by some fatwas and popular rulings among some Muslims that acting is forbidden. At that time, I lived a psychological struggle, as I felt as a result of such a pressure that I had to choose either to leave acting or to give up my decision. I was not accepted neither by Muslims, who consider art as a forbidden act, nor by the community of artists and intellectuals, who considered my step a regressive one. I was almost about to stop my career, really, because I realized that I had to prove again and again and again that I am a good actress. And it was quite impossible, that this is what I felt, to engage with a good number of artists and intellectuals in a meaningful dialogue. But the passion, my passion for this art, and the support of my husband and partner, Roger Assaf, with whom I share intellectual, political, and ethical convictions and principles, made us decide that we would achieve change through actions, through artistic actions, through making theater, through a special approach of theater making. So after having gone through this dilemma, we took this decision that we want to do a different approach and to try to change these mentalities through real theater making, real experiences. And our first experience, theater experience after the war, was Job Memories, Mudakkarat Ayyub. It was in 1993, right after the end of the Civil War that lasted from 1975 to 1991. So what we did, it was about, the issue was very polemic, and it was a taboo. It was about the 17,000 of disappeared, of kidnapped and forcibly disappeared people during the war, and it intersected with the destruction of the heart of downtown of Beirut. The main destruction for people who don't know of Beirut, didn't happen during the war. It happened with the project of Solidaire, the project of Rafiq Hariri, who, while he was in the 90s a prime minister, he issued a law about a private company owned by him and his family and his partners. And by law, he confiscated the whole downtown of Beirut. It was described of being the biggest urbanocide of the recent history. So the two subjects together, the intersection of two subjects, was really a very risky theater experience, and we were censored. We faced censorship. But just to tell you how we managed to form at that time a new group, and intentionally we gathered people from West Beirut and East Beirut. And you know that that the two sectional parts of Beirut were divided by demarcation line, and nobody could cross during the war between the two sides. So the two parts of the group were different in political positions, in education, in their vision of Lebanon's history, in their perception of the war, in the memories they have about Beirut, and even in their aesthetics and their experience of acting and theater making. And you cannot imagine how divided we were at the beginning of the war, and how this, again, this organic collective experience of theater making. At the time we had also with us the famous writer Ilyas Khouri, who was one of the fierce the most fierce opponent of the Hariri project, along with us and other intellectuals. And during this process of living this experience of theater making, we had to confront our demons. We had to review our position. We have to open a long and very hard discussions, and we have to really also to create a kind of common style and common aesthetic. And it was very, very, very rewarding. And it was, after that, it was one of the principles of our way to do theater till now.
Yeah, I mean, it's like throughout your career, and maybe this is throughout your career, you've made turned personal challenges into social action, right, through theater. I know that for me, theater has always been a way to answer questions and sort of solve problems. And it seems that also for you, you've taken the opportunity, like, you know, of a personal challenge and turned it into social action by involving diverse communities and marginalized communities. So my hat off to you. I'm curious, as we wrap up our conversation before we begin taking questions from the audience, you know, last year, the year 2020 was such a difficult year for all of us, for you know, the pandemic and many other events. So I'm curious, what is your hope for Beirut, and what is your hope for us in the US?
I hope for Beirut that we will be able to keep her main identity as a open agora, this 30-60-degree open agora, where citizens could really continue to demonstrate, to claim their rights, etc. Because you cannot imagine how marvelous was Beirut during the months before the state and the political and military power of Beirut used the COVID as an alibi to really let people be confined in their houses. They don't care about their health. They care about really stay safe themselves. So Beirut all of a sudden transformed to a wonderful agora where hundreds of tents were set up and where thousands of people were in every corner asking questions, debating, reclaiming open spaces, reviving the old cinemas, the forgotten theaters, and there was processions of clowns, of intrusive performances between the streets, and everywhere it was, and it kept sights of this vividness despite everything, as I showed in the film and as I did myself. So what I dream about is really to be able to go forward and to keep this soul of Beirut, this open agora. What I lot of people ask me, like you are asking, Torange, how can we help you? Of course.
I'm asking how are you going to help us?
Yes.
I have no confidence that we can help you, but how are you going to help us?
Yeah, now the question is how us can help us.
Yes.
Because now I want to begin to come up to this idea. I would like to tell you something that I lived in January, I think, where you were in Minnesota. It was January or February 2020.
Yeah.
So I was jogging there, and in one of an open discussion, I was asked by the audience to tell about Beirut, what's happening, etc. So I told about the demonstration and how we have been repressed by with a lot of violence by the police, and that we were suffering a lot from gas bombs. So I asked openly, in a very open and humoristic way, where do I found this 100% étanche masks? And I said to myself, the States must be the place where we can find everything. And to my surprise, nobody knew. Even in the hotel, the housekeeper of the hotel hadn't have an answer. But one of the audience told me that he can help me by buying this on the internet. Of course, people laughed and they were very moved by what I was telling about Beirut and about my claim to possess this 100% proof mask. Gas mask, yes. But I felt that the American audience at that time was reacting at a distance, as if they were in an Italian theater with a fourth wall. But when George Floyd was killed, the sad event, and demonstrations invaded the streets of Minnesota, and later on all the different states of America, I felt that all of a sudden there is a common cause. People are feeling now that it's not going to happen to me. The idea of it's not going to happen to me. It's not going to happen to me is now away, and that we are all in the same situation. And I felt that the American people are transformed, from being spectators to being actors. So when I'm asked to this question, how could we help you? Of course, in Lebanon, there is a tremendous need all kinds of help, financial and food and all materials, medicines, vaccines, everything, because not only in Lebanon, I don't know if everybody know that we have more than 3 million refugees that are suffering double and triple and quadruple suffering, one over the others, one crisis after another crisis after another crisis. But what I want to say here is that so in fact I felt that a common cause is bonding us, and that American protesters are now not anymore spectators but spectators. This common cause is an international cause, and if we don't work all together to break these chains of the hegemony of and the dominance of the military and financial superpowers, nobody will be safe. What I hope is that we become internationally and progressively solidaire, and as so that my hopes for my city and my community are the same hopes for Palestine, for Yemen, for Iraq, for Libya, for Sudan, for the African countries, for Egypt, for the states, for all the countries. What I wish is to stop by all means, to try all together to stop by all means our exploitation, our killings, our slavery, because human life matters.
Thank you, Hanane. Thank you. You're so inspiring, and your work has made such tremendous impact. I'm really in awe. Thank you so much for everything you have done so far and continue to do. I can go on talking to you for hours, but I think our audience is ready to start asking questions. Are you ready for us to take questions from the audience?
Yes, of course. I've been looking forward to hearing the audience. This is the most enthusiastic part for me.
Excellent. So our first question is from Basma El Hosseini. So Basma, if you would turn on your camera and your video and audio, then we can see you and you can ask your question.
Hanane, I know you very well, but I'm trying here to take some distance and look at you as an artist and a human being. And in all your work and your life, the most striking thing for me, that there is no life, art, theory, and practice, emotion, and intellect. It's almost like there is this holistic kind of approach to life. So this is for me something like of a Renaissance approach.
I'm sorry, Basma, I had a problem in hearing you. If somebody if I can read the question on chat, or I grasp a little bit of it, but I don't want to miss the core of the question.
I can read,
yes,
Hanane,
please.
I can read
yes.
Basma's question. She says, Dear Hanane, your work and life represent an exemplary connection between practice and theory, emotion and intellect, ordinary life and art. How do you see the role of artists, especially Lebanese and Arab artists, in the very challenging conditions in Lebanon and Arab countries? How can they, especially young artists, connect their personal ambitions as artists with the social and political context?
I don't know if I will answer well the question. It's a very important question, as usually Basma does always. I think it's time to radicalize all our behaviors, our practices, our visions, our ways of making, of working and living. We noticed that it's good, of course, to react, for example, and to lobby in order to, for example, to offer grants of relief to artists in order to be able to do to continue their life on one hand and their creativity on the other hand, and in order not to to see a lot of brains and a lot of talents leaking out of the country. But it's time to begin to act rather to react. I think it's time to create real chains of solidarity on all levels and alternative ways of working, like, for example, what we are trying to establish now as cooperative, and revisiting also the roles of syndicates and the different syndicates, and also our relationship to the state, because if we cannot weave all these threads together, and we cannot be cross-sectorial, and we cannot build strong bridges among us on all levels, that we are all going to fail. And now I always wonder how long could we resist, because, for example, in Lebanon, there is no kind of AIDS at all, apart from some cultural associations that are trying their best to act and to help people. So and I think the experience of the 4th of August taught us a lot, because suddenly we realized, either voluntarily or involuntarily, that the limitations and the obstacles and the segmentation between, for example, arts and everyday life, or, for example, between humanitarian aids or something different. These interfaces are so porous and so kind of unexistent, that we have to be on the streets, to talk to people, to sweep the floors, to present, to organize the artistic nights, etc., etc. So this catastrophe, this apocalypse, I think, revealed for us, was a great revelation for us. I don't have maybe a precise answer, but I have a lot of questions. This raised a lot of questions added to the question of Basma in my mind. And I, as Torange said, through my everyday life and through my arts, I will keep going on in this fantastic journey of and territory of Christians.
And if I can make an observation, I mean, it's interesting to see that this, in the face of government failing and no infrastructure, it's the cultural workers that are out on the streets and taking on the role of supporting the population. It's the artists, it's the cultural workers.
Not only thousands of young students who are studying in various fields, gathered naturally, found themselves on the streets, and this is what this porous interaction. So students and the cultural operators and artists and humanitarian workers, and everybody was there from the civil society, and whereas the state, the municipalities, nothing was done. Nothing, literally nothing was done to really help people. And it was a kind of a melting pot of different wills and elements and materials and ways of doing not only the culture. This is what I'm talking about this
Mhm.
porous, you know, infiltration between sectors, between capacities, between all means, yeah,
Mhm.
that we have.
Great. Let's move on to our next question by, is it Bent Scheller?
Bente.
Bente, would
Yeah.
you turn on your camera, your video and audio? Would you like to ask your question, or would you like me to read it?
Well, I'll give it a try. I hope my connection is good enough. Thank you so much. What an amazing film. And really, Hanane, whenever I see you, it is very, very thrilling for me. And I wanted to ask you, because I have attended the play several times and I always found it very inspiring, obviously. Is there any conversation that you recall with the audience that you found inspiring, that you remember as something where you changed your mind afterwards, or that particularly helped you in developing a future stage of your play? And if I'm allowed to ask a second one, I mean, people all over the world have been enticed by your play. You won many awards with it, and I know that you played from Asia to Latin America, basically everywhere. So what is it that you think that strikes a chord with people all over the world in jogging? Thank you.
Yeah, maybe I will begin. First of all, thank you for all your support, Bente, with your Hindishbol Foundation, because thanks of this help, I was able to tour and give hundreds of free performances. And here I would like to mention that in jogging, I really refused to abide to the censorship law, and I was risking the jail and amend of thousands of dollars, and every theater that would accept to host me would be closed forever. That's why in the beginning I didn't find any place to present, and I was obliged to present it in alternative spaces. So thank you for that. So I will begin from the end of your questions. What I can say is wherever jogging was presented, it aroused a lot of emotions and interests. But the reactions were different inside Lebanon and outside Lebanon. I'm talking about the precise and detailed reactions. In Lebanon, for example, it was very different reactions depending on the geographic region where I'm presenting, because as you know now, Lebanon is like cantons, and in each canton there is this warlord who is now either a deputy or a minister or a leader or a mafioso that is taking in hand the community. And so depending on where I'm going to present my play, it was sometimes a big risk, because I'm tackling what I call the Bermuda triangles of taboos, which are religion, sex, and politics. And because I dare to tackle and to question, for example, sacred items like the idea of martyrdom, it was for some people, and either for some friends of me, unimaginable to go, for example, to present it where, for example, Hezbollah is dominating, because it's unacceptable at all to talk about those. I kept on telling, if I don't go, if I only preach the converted, if I don't go where I have to stir the stagnant water, so it's useless. So I dared to go to such to different areas. And one day, somebody from the audience, while I was doing the Q&A, threatened me by his gun. He had a gun with him, and he told me, "How did you dare to do such thing?" I said, "What?" He told me, "You don't have the right at all to talk about martyrdom and about martyrs the way that you did." And he kept on telling, and who prevents a guy like me to take his gun and to shoot at you? So this is the gun. So it was very polemic and very controversial, and this is what I wanted I didn't want applause always. I wanted to, and this act opened at that time a very interesting discussion, an agora among the community, among the audience of this community, and it was very, very, very rich. And finally, the guy was listening very, very carefully about all opinions. So this was one of the most memorable moments. There are a lot of memorable moments, very funny sometimes, very interesting about women who attended the play. But maybe I'll keep it for another occasion. But to talk about the international audience, they were very all over wherever I go. It shocks and it raised interest because it deconstructs the preconceived ideas, the cliche they have about the Arab women, about the Arab Muslim woman, and about an Arab Muslim woman who is a big actress and who is acting freely on stage and who dares to tackle such taboos. So this was, and a common point between this international audience and the local audience is sometimes in some, for example, camps where you have, for example, a kind of radicalist way of practicing Islam, and where, for example, women are raised and taught that everything is haram. If you show your hand is haram, if you sing is haram, if you express your idea is haram, you have to be dominated, everything. And when they see me on stage, and when especially they see me that I shout to Allah, wanting him to be accountable for what he did for me, this was scandalous, for example, for them. And some of them left at some point, but I recontacted them, and I had coffee with them, and I read in the coffee for them, and we resumed a very good relationship. They came back to see the play, and they enjoyed it very much. So this is the kind of different reactions that I get. Thank you.
Thank you, Hanane. So we have one audience member who has asked 3 questions, so I'm just going to pick one of them, and I will read that one for you. So this is from Mona Merhi, and she's asking, Hanane, you were very active in the uprising or revolution of October 17th, and you were part of many tricky moments of political engagement in Lebanon since the civil war. When you look at young artists today who are politically engaged and who are creating their own tools, what difference do you see from the 70s generation?
First of all, hi Mona. I'm very happy that you are with us here. The difference is that they didn't live the war. They heard about the war, and at some point they didn't want at all to hear about anything that has to do with the war. I'm talking about this generation, not the post-war generation, because the post-war generation had almost one subject to tackle, is the war, the memory of war, etc., the anti-amnesia actions, etc. But this generation is more lucid. They went through such difficult social and political times in their everyday life that pushed them to read more, to ask more, to discuss, to form different kinds of groups groups based on sectors, like, for example, workers and culture and arts, or cross-cultural, cross-sectorial groups, like, for example, Jabha, a group called Jabha, a very, very interesting group. And they are really listening to each other when something happens in Beirut or in Lebanon. They don't come up with big ideas with meta narrative, what we call meta narrative, ready meta narrative. They really come together to inquire, to propose different articles, different point of views, and the decision they take it very in a very lucid way. And to my joy and my surprise, they give me the desire to go on further and further, and they give me ideas also to my own creativity. So it's a different political approach. It's a different social relationships. We are not right wings or left wings or I don't know, Marxist and anymore. We are citizens that we are reclaiming our right to the city, our right of freedom of expression, our right to vote, our right to live, our right to enjoy a culture and arts, our right to form association, our right to political to cultural policies. So this kind of syncretic and global consciousness and this modesty and this way of dealing with issues is very different from our generation. This is what I can answer you, Mona.
It's really interesting. So Peggy Chain has a clarifying question. Hanane, in our interview, you said that you've lost your 4 children. I think this is when we were talking about your relationship to Beirut.
Yeah.
So Peggy's asking, can you clarify, talk a little bit more about what you mean by having lost 4 children?
We are a family, a middle-class family. We used to be a middle-class family. Now we are a lower middle-class family. And we are not rich. The only wealth that we wanted and we counted on is the education. We wanted really, we spent every penny we have, every effort, every affection, every means that we have to educate our children and to offer them this kind of wealth. And we were dreaming about our children contributing to do a better, to collaborate in building a better future to the country. And unfortunately, because of this series of catastrophes that are living in Lebanon, I compare them to the Russian puppies. Whenever you unfold one puppet, a lot of puppets pops out. So it's a continuous series of catastrophes that really don't leave space to the young generation to afford staying in Lebanon, to work, to have chance to have a good. I had to agree that my children, one after another, to leave the country and to go to Canada, because in Canada, when I made my calculations, I noticed that if I pay in Canada for the scholarity and for the housing and for the food, etc., I would pay half what I would pay in Lebanon in order to ensure a good education, to my children, for example, in the American University or in the USG University. So I had to agree on the decision to go and they didn't return, and now hundreds and hundreds and thousands of young people are leaving, and some of those who want to leave cannot because they don't have the possibility to go. But in the same time, as I said, there's still this agglomeration of young people who don't want to leave and who are really keen on resisting and on keeping on continuing this reviving this breath of revolution. Anyway, as it happened in Egypt and other countries, even if the revolution somehow was stopped by totalitarian regime or military regimes, the freedom that we experienced in those countries and in Lebanon, and the utopias that we saw with our own eyes that it could happen, it could be realized, will change our life forever. Those things will never be the same, no matter what could be the situation in Lebanon or elsewhere.
So all four of your children live in Canada now?
They all got their high education in Canada, but one after the other, they got jobs. So one is still in Canada, in Montreal, another one in Dubai, a third one in Zurich in Switzerland, and the fourth one in Cambridge in the UK.
Yeah, we all have families spread around the globe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Could we see the people who are asking questions?
Yes. So I'm going to move to Abdullah Al-Kafri.
Yes.
Abdullah, would you like to turn on your video and audio, and let's see if we can see you ask your question.
Hello, Hanane.
Hello.
And
Thank
this is
you.
really a great film, and it's so good and so beautiful to listen to you and to this incredible conversation. I was so honored to be a partner in crime in this project.
The dramaturge, Abdullah.
Remember, Hanan, one of the ideas or of the suggestions we were considering regarding the dramaturgical treatment, that to ask you not to act or not to perform, being Hanan simply, not to represent yourself. Today, in this post-pandemic reality where politicians, corrupted people are doing more than performing, doing more than acting, doing more than representation, how can we keep the theater and keep the urge of the theater as a space for representation and imagination?
I think, Abdullah, we have to, I keep on recalling this idea of 30-60 degree of open agora. And I'm keeping on recalling this idea because I'm on the streets, and I experienced even during the COVID and during the revolution, I kept on going out on the streets, imagining new ways of talking to people, borrowing some traditional ideas like the musahharati, the color of Ramadan, and transforming it to the color of the middle of the day. So the color of to people to wake up in the middle of the day. This is a metaphor. So and with poems, with songs, and you remember when I also performed distributing the newspaper that was forbidden, the newspaper of the 17th of October. Also, I used the proverbs, very popular proverbs, and I used the memory of the, if you noticed, I'm sure you noticed, of the most famous Egyptian films, Akhbar, Thawra, Jumhuriya, and I mix things together. And I go to the street and I'm there and I act and I perform. I think because of theaters are closed and because we have to really be careful about the COVID, especially with the horrifying numbers of cases now in Lebanon, we cannot go into closed spaces, but we have our streets are ours, our spaces are our squares are ours, our buildings are ours. So this is in my opinion, a golden opportunity to تروح وما حدا بيردك. You go and you do whatever you like to do and whatever you want to say. And believe me, we don't lack of ideas, we don't lack of creativity. There are tremendous, wonderful Lebanese, Syrian, Palestinian, Armenian artists who are here in Lebanon, and they are all keen to continue this journey. So let's do it.
Thank you. And as a great follow-up to that, is it Ayn O'Brien in Ireland?
Yeah, Ayn, yes.
Would you turn on your video and audio and ask your question? If not, I can read it.
Hello, Ayn.
Hi, Hanane.
Anya.
In Ireland. The film was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I was just saying that I loved the phrase that came out in the conversation earlier, how us can help us.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of how us can help us. And so it evoked for me the dismantling of boundaries and differences between artists and activists across borders. So here I am in Ireland. And you mentioned the notion of the idea of the cooperative. And I'm wondering, in the arts, what might that mean in the post-pandemic world in practice?
It means that, for example, now we are considering, the cinema people are considering seriously and in a very thought way to establish an alternative cooperative for producing cinema, because in the normal times, artists that really are auteur and they don't follow the commercial cinema, and most of the creative filmmakers in Lebanon are of the alternative stream, not the commercial stream. We're obliged to abide to the desire of the producer, to the policy of the funders, etc., and they were suffering a lot. So above the suffering now, there is the suffering of losing, for a lot of them lost the studios after the bombings, they lost their jobs, etc., etc. So they wanted to imagine a structure, a cooperative where they put all together all they have. So those who are have camera and micros, the script writing, the editors, the technical knowledge, etc. All the people now are gathering in the same cooperative and putting together everything and beginning to imagine kinds of program for writing and for funding. They, for example, one of the solutions they are imagining is to form these chains of solidarity among the diaspora, the Lebanese diaspora and the Arab diaspora, and people like you, because, for example, when the bombs happened, all of you contacted me and asked me how we can help, and some of you didn't ask. They sent the help immediately. So when there is an issue like that, an important issue about imagining a kind of such a cooperative that could be an example for other communities and other countries, I think a lot of people could gather in order to really cooperate to the success of such project. So this is the kind of thing that they are imagining, because if not, nobody will be able to continue to create and to continue his job or her job.
Thank you. We'll go to the next question. It's from Catherine. Is it Hilbe?
Yeah, Catherine Hilbe. Yeah.
Yes.
Hello, Catherine.
Hello, Hanane. So good to see you.
Hello. How are you? I was very happy to see you among the audience in Zurich.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you. It was a beautiful performance in a very strange time. And I very much appreciated our conversation afterwards too. So thank you. So my question in this case is, you talked about how the new generation, you spoke about that on the phone when we spoke too, how the new generation is taking to the streets, the ones who can't leave but really want to change things. Do you have the feeling that there is a sharing between sort of the older activist generation and the new one? Is there a togetherness, a sharing of stories of inspiration, or do you feel that you are in a way also sometimes looked for as guidance, since you've been in this activist world for such a long time?
Yeah, when I talked about the lucidity of such generation, is that they are aware also that they cannot cut the bonds with the old generation. There is always room, space to learn about past experiences, especially the failure experiences. So, this kind of bonds exists, and they are keen to invite writers or for example economists, or even all deputies and different people, in order to listen to them and to share their experiences. Of course, they don't approach the corrupted ones. They make good choices, and in some occasions, and there are fortunately some examples that could be considered as a guidance, kind of a what was the expression considered to be as
guidance, sharing, inspiration?
Yeah, guidance, sharing, inspiration. I am lucky to be considered one of those people, but I'm with them not in my as being such a person. I was keen from the first moment to be with them, to learn from them, to share with them their thoughts. You cannot imagine, Catherine, how far and how much could you learn from this generation. Yani they are keen on listening to us, but we learn a lot from them, and this kind of relationship exists. For my happiness and for the benefit of everybody. Yes, it exists.
That's wonderful. So I'm going to combine two of our questions. Adila, is it Laidi Hani?
Adila Laidi Haniye.
Haniye. So she is very complimentary, and she says you're amazing. and she's curious what your next project, your artistic project is. But before you think about what you want to answer to that, Lena Mali is asking, what is the project that you dream to do next if you have the opportunity despite these circumstances all over the world? So what is your dream project, Hanane, and what is next for you?
I dream to play in Palestine. I dream to do a joint project with wonderful Palestinian. Let me say that Palestine is so near and yet so far, because we cannot go to Palestine. We are prevented of going to Palestine, and I knew since years that there is a wonderful movement of wonderful theater makers and artists and contemporary visual artists, etc. And by the way, Adila is the director of the Contemporary Museum of Palestine, and she's a very dear friend and very, very, very creative herself. And she keeps on asking me what could be my next project. So my dream is, for example, to do a joint project with Hala Ahlayhel, for example, with Nizar Zabi. I didn't have the opportunity to see their work except in foreign festivals. For example, in Minnesota, for the first time in my life, I saw a play of Nizar, a wonderful play. Ala, I came up to know his work in Edinburgh while we were invited together to the same, and it's fun. I'm not saying that I want to work with Syrian, because I have the big chance to work with a lot of Syrians when they flew in 2000 after the repression of the revolution in Syria. So I really got the chance to work with a lot of them, and one of them is, of course, Abdullah, who is still here for our big joy and chance. So yeah, this could be my future project, and I have an idea, a very very taboo, that tackles a big taboo. Maybe one day I'll talk to you about it, Adila, and see if it's possible to do it.
You don't want to share your taboos with us?
It's not the time. It's not the time to share it now, but I will as when I feel that it's ready to be said and to be presented and to be
and just I mean, for our audience who may not know, why are you not able to go to Palestine, Hanane?
Because, as I said, Palestine was took off by force. Was the state of Israel was implemented with the help of the superpowers at that time, especially with the British. The Balfour Promise is very famous, and since then. We are not, neither the Israeli, we consider Israel as an enemy, that is racial, that is a repressive regime, that is committed series of crimes on behalf of Palestinians, but as a citizen coming from the southern of Lebanon, I've been always living bombing and sheltering by the Israel army. Even now, during these days of confinements, our air is invaded by the Israeli invasion, who don't care about our open air, our sovereignty, and bomb Syria, starting Lebanon. So this is a kind of a psychological and a political position toward this state. from our behalf. And second, by law, Israel is considered till now an enemy of Lebanon, and we cannot deal with the enemy. So these are in summary the reasons of not being able to go to Palestine.
Thank you. So with that, we wrap up our conversation with the lovely Hanane Hajj Ali. I'd like to thank the League of Professional Theater Women, our guest of honor, Hanane Hajj Ali, and all of you, our audience. We hope that you'll be inspired by today's program to find out more about the 27 remarkable women from 18 countries who were nominated for the 2020 Gilder Coigney Award. All of the program's events are available for viewing on the League of Professional Theater Women's YouTube channel, including last night's award ceremony. You can also visit the League of Professional Theater Women's website for more information. The links are included in the closing credits.